honestly, raccoons are kind of cool. Bello, Bard of the Brambles, is a raccoon bard who costs Gruul and 1. He's a 3/3 that says during our turn, all of our non-equipment artifacts and non-aura enchantments become 4/4 indestructible elemental creatures that whenever they deal combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. This will overpower most of our opponents very, very quickly in most of our games, so let's go ahead and abuse that lovingly. In order to break this commander, we are going to start with a series of enchantment anthems we are going to use. The core strategy is going to be to get these anthems on the board and then turn them sideways as elemental creatures to our opponent. Let's begin with Orcish Aura Flame that gives all of our attacking creatures 1/0. Battle Plan gives them all 2/0. Concord with the Kami allows us to draw a card if we have an enchanted creature, create a 1/1 colorless spirit token at our end step, or put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control that already has a counter on it. Dormant Grove lets us put a 1/1 counter on any creature we control at the beginning of combat. Blood Mist says at the beginning of our combat we give a creature double strike. Flowstone Surge gives a creature gives all of our creatures +1/+1. Gaia's Anthem gives them all +1/+1. Close Quarters says anytime any of those creatures becomes blocked, they get to automatically deal 1 damage to any creature or player. Rage Reflection and Berserker's Onslaught give them double strike. Shared Animosity will give all of our elementals we have 1/0 for every other elemental on the board that's swinging. Leyline of Abundance comes down for free if we have it in our opening hand. It can also give us 1/1 counters on all of the creatures on our board for 8 mana. It also gives us some extra power to mana dorks, but we're not really using that in this deck. Death's Presence says that anytime one of our creatures dies, we get to put 1/1 counters on any other creature we control, where X is the power of that card. Now, while that doesn't really include our elementals, because unfortunately they can't die, I say unfortunately, but you know what I mean, we do have tokens in this deck that come from other enchantments, and if those tokens die, Death's Presence can throw their counters around. Ferocity of the Wilds gives all of our attacking non-humans 1/0 and Trample. Gruul Warchant gives all of our creatures 1/0 and Menace. Street Riot gives them all 1/0 and Trample, like I said. I just clicked that again. That's my bad. But that just about does it for all of the anthems. We do need to keep our commander alive, though, for our strategy to work, so a Mask of Avacyn and a Mirror Shield will give hexproof to our commander, with a Mortal's Resolve being a quick way to give Indestructible to our commander to protect us from potential harm later. Timeless Witness gives us some recursion when we need to get our stuff back, and I mentioned the token producers. Let's talk about the 3 of those we are going to be using, beginning with Cybership. When this deals combat damage to a player, we get to manifest the top 2 cards of their library on our board as Cybermen. We're never going to crew this thing, we're just going to let it be animated with our commander. Sandworm Convergence can be animated as well, and at the beginning of our end step, we make a 5/5 green worm, and Dragon Cultist says if we deal 5 or more damage this turn, then we get a 4/4 red dragon creature, and that creature has flying, which can easily get over any things our elementals struggle with. Honestly, the core strategy is very simple here. Just get a bunch of enchantments on the board, wait until combat, animate them, and turn them sideways at our opponent's noggin. And if we make it through, we draw lots of cards so we can do it over and over and over again violently. Honestly, it's a pretty great strategy, but I did mention our commander draws us cards, so we probably should talk about the other ways we're going to draw cards in this deck. So let's get to it. Now, while our commander can draw lots of cards, it is not the only way we are going to be drawing stuff. We can't always rely on our commander being on the board, so let's go ahead and talk about our supplementary draw package. Garruk's Uprising and Garruk's Pack Leader give access to draw whenever our enchantments touch the board, because they will come down as 4/4 creatures. Enchantress's Presence and Eidolon of Blossoms gives us extra draw when we cast our enchantment spells. Stolen Strategy and Outpost Siege and Visions of Phyrexia will give us access to impulse draw in various forms, with Stolen Strategy impulse drawing from our opponent's decks. Elvish Archivist lets us draw a card when an enchantment touches the board, but only once per turn. Wildseer Scouring Maw gives our enchantments Cascade of all things, and Sunbird's Invocation gives Pseudo Cascade by letting us exile the top X cards of our library and cast any card that is among them whenever we cast an enchantment spell, or really any spell. The cards from among them that we can cast have to cost the amount that the spell had originally in its mana cost. So if we cast a 4-cost spell, we exile X and cast another 4-cost or lower spell from the top. It's like Cascade, only there are extra steps and they are better. That said, with draw, we are always trying to dig further into our deck for something, and our opponents are always trying to win the game. So what if we dug further into our deck for ways to cut them out of that? Now, I got to have some fun with the removal package of this deck because of how wacky the commander is. So let's start out with a non-enchantress card, Runaway Boulder. This 6-mana card touches the board and deals 6 damage to any creature an opponent controls. I've played this previously in a couple Blink decks, and it's really fun, but in this deck, all we're going to be doing with it is just dropping it on the board, killing a thing, and then ramming somebody with this as a 4/4 elemental. Abrade can blow up an artifact or a creature. Return to Nature can blow up an artifact, enchantment, or a card in a graveyard. Decimate lets us get rid of an artifact, creature, enchantment, and a land, which lets us stop things like Glacial Chasm from hurting us. Lignify lets us get rid of any creature on the board by turning it into an 0/4 with no abilities. This is a great way to shut down any build around commander. The Flux deals 4 damage to any creature and then gives us Impulse Draw over multiple turns. Magmatic Galleon deals 5 damage to a creature when it touches the board, and if one or more creatures are dealt excess non-combat damage, we make a treasure token. This is also going to automatically animate whenever our turn comes around. Heretic's Punishment lets us choose a creature and then put the top 3 cards of our library into the graveyard and then deal damage to that creature equal to the highest converted mana cost among those cards. Our deck has a lot of high mana cost cards, so usually we can kill some pretty easy targets with this. Colony Ambush and Bridgeworks Battles and Stump Stop are all various kinds of fight spells and do damage spells that happen to be MDFCs on the other side. Finally, Warstorm Surge deals damage equal to the power of any creature whenever it enters the battlefield to anything our opponents have. So when we play an enchantment, we will deal 4 damage to any creature or any player. Whether we need burn or need removal, we will have access to it with Warstorm Surge. But we also have a couple of board wipes as well, and these have the benefit of being pseudo-asymmetrical because our creatures are indestructible or just enchantments. Chain Reaction deals X damage to every creature, with X is the number of creatures on the battlefield, and Starstorm deals X damage to each creature when we pay into it. We can also cycle it if we don't need it during a particular game. That said, that does it for all of the removal. We're going to stop our opponents from playing a lot of cards, but we do need the ability to ramp into all of our cards. So let's talk about ramp and mana before we move on to the gameplay section. Now, with the ramp section of this deck, I want to make sure that we are split evenly between traditional ramp and ramp that specifically benefits what our deck is doing. So, in the traditional area of ramp, we have cards like Search for Tomorrow and Arcane Signet and Wood Elves. But outside of that, we've got some other interesting cards that happen to be enchantments. But first, let's talk about Wreck and Rebuild. This can blow up an artifact or an enchantment, or it lets us mill 5 cards and then put any land from among them onto the battlefield. This is a wonderful card that is super modal for our deck. Honored Heirloom is a great mana rock that also lets us get rid of cards in graveyards if we need. Hedron Archive is that 4 mana card our commander cares about, while also being a mana rock that can draw us cards later in the game. Path to Annihilation is an enchantment that gives us 2 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawns, and also gives those Eldrazi spawns the ability to tap for mana. And if we cast any creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, we gain 4 life, but we're never going to be doing that. Goblin and Necromancer can lower the cost of all of our spells in our hand. Fertile Ground, Overgrowth, Utopia, Sprawl, and Wild Growth are all enchantments that drop onto our lands and let them tap for more mana. Wayfarer's Bauble and Search for Tomorrow are traditional ramp that get basic lands out of our deck. Arcane Signet can be used as a generic mana rock. Wood Elves can get a forest out of our deck, which is great for being able to grab dual lands. And Stone Speaker Crystal again fits our commander's 4 mana theme, but on top of being a 2 mana rock, we can sacrifice it to exile any number of graveyards and draw a card. Honestly, this is one of the strongest mana rocks in the Hedron Archive Sisay's Ring style of cards, and I don't know why more people don't play it. It's just kinda great. In any world where you would run Hedron Archive, you probably also run a Stone Speaker Crystal. It's just really, really good. But past that, we do need to talk about the land base of the deck, which begins with 10 mountains and 12 forests. After that, we've got 6 dual lands. Gruul Turf is our bounce land, so we can reuse utility stuff. Sheltered Thicket can be searched out with Wood Elves, as can Cinderglade. Command Tower, Mossfire Valley, and Game Trail are all your standard dual lands that can be ran in basically any deck. Then we've got the fetching lands, which are Shire Terrace, Promising Vein, Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wild, Escape Tunnel, and Myriad Landscape. The Landscape operates as a ramping card. Escape Tunnel and Terramorphic and Evolving Wilds are your standard. Drop them on the board, crack them immediately, get a land out of the deck cards, and Promising Vein and Shire Terrace operate as regularly sped fast mana, but we can crack them later if we need specific kinds of mana. Usually, we just drop them down as colorless and let them stay. Then, for our utility lands, we've got Mosswort Bridge, which lets us hide away one of the top 4 cards in our deck under the land, and then we can cast it at any point if we have creatures with power 10 or greater. This just means we need to have our commander and 2 enchantments on the board. Then we have Pit of Offerings, which lets us get rid of problematic cards in the graveyard. Kessig Wolf Run, which can give a single creature XO and trample until end of turn. And then we have Spine Rock Null, which is Mosswort Bridge, but cares about damage instead of having big creatures. And honestly, now that I'm tripping over my words so much, I realize maybe I shouldn't make all these videos in a row. But you know what really requires more cognition than just reading cards? Actually doing the gameplay section of this video, so let's do that really soon. Now let's talk about keepable hands. We want to make sure we've got the ability to get the commander out on curve, which really just means having 3 mana. We want access to red and green mana, and we want a couple of cards that cost 4 or greater so that our commander can be super online on turn 4. Let's see, this hand does meet the criteria. We've got a Terramorphic Expanse, we've got 2 mountains, a Mossfire Valley, Dragon Cultist, Death Presence, and Stone Speaker Crystal. This means we have a very good curve into all of our spells, so let's go ahead and start with our draw, play our Terramorphic Expanse, crack it to get a forest, and then move to the next turn. Next turn's up, and we've drawn a Mirror Shield, so we can play a Mossfire Valley, tap 2, get that Mirror Shield on the board, and now we can be off to the races. Once the next turn comes up, the only real move that we should be worried about is getting our commander on the board. After that, we're basically free to do whatever the hell we want. Now, when the next turn comes up, we do have a choice to equip the Mirror Shield early, and honestly, I think that's going to be the safe move. We sacrifice a turn of plays, but we do get to keep our commander out long term. Unless we do something a little bit sneaky. Now, luckily for us, we do happen to have a good mana rock in our hand. Once we tap 4, we can play the Stone Speaker Crystal, and we can tap that to put the Mirror Shield under our commander. Under normal circumstances, we would be sacrificing our turn in order to get this move going, but since we happen to have one of those 2 mana rocks, we can just go off to the races and be perfectly fine. Also, when it's our turn, this is a 4/4 creature for the turns that matters. Now that we are at turn 5, and we have a couple options. We can play the Berserker's Onslaught to give ourselves the double strike now, or we can play the Death's Presence to get something out on curve. For my part, I think I would rather get out, say, the Berserker's Onslaught. The double strike is far more important to me this early, and being able to swing with this as a 4/4 elemental now at somebody can force them to chump block with potentially an important card like a Mana Dork. I want to go ahead and get this ball rolling now. Now that it's the next turn, we want to go ahead and be super aggressive. So as much as I want to tap the Stone Speaker Crystal and use it as actual mana, I think it would be more important to tap 4, play Close Quarters, and use these 3/4 attacking creatures during our turn. Remember, they all have double strike right now, and they're all 4/4s with haste. And thanks to the close quarters, if they get blocked, we get an extra 1 damage to aim wherever we choose. If all of our creatures get blocked, we might be able to aim a lightning bolt effectively at a problematic creature on the board. Being able to do that can turn the tide of a game for us. Getting rid of somebody's Zulaport Cutthroat early, for instance, or an Ophiomancer can do wonders for stabilizing ourselves against other more established deck archetypes. It's our turn again, and we keep missing land drops, but honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world, because with our current board state, we can go ahead and play Street Riot. This will give all of our attacking creatures 1/0 and trample. So we're going to have the same ability to attack on our combat step with double strike, but now we're fighting with double strikers that have 5 power and also have trample, as well as that close quarters burn that'll happen if things don't go our way, if people block. Now, at this point, we are probably getting somebody very low with their life, especially swinging in with this board right now. So, we need to go ahead and coup de grace at least one player during the next turn. I think turn 8 is a very reasonable turn to eliminate a player out of the game. Some decks can eliminate all players out of the game by this point, but we are just going to go after one poor sad sap. It's turn 8, and luckily we got Spine Rock Null, so we can go ahead and play that down and see what cards it grants us. Looks like the only real viable option is the Timeless Witness, so we're going to go ahead and put that under the Spine Rock Null, and the other cards go under the deck. Now we want to go ahead and make sure that one player is dead. So we know we're not going to be using the Stone Speaker Crystal here as mana. We are going to use it as violence. So we're going to pay 3 mana and get Shared Animosity on the board. Now when these swing, they will all swing with an extra 3/0 from the Shared Animosity. With the Street Riot on top of that, they are all swinging as 9 power indestructible double strikers. 9 power for each of these creatures is insane. That's 18 damage per creature, and we have 4 going right now. 36 damage aimed at 2 separate players is enough to probably eliminate at least one of them, if not 2. And remember, they are indestructible, and our commander is hexproof. We are on turn 8. 2 players are likely eliminated from the game right now. In the strange world that we are at turn 9 and things have not ended for our opponents, we can go ahead and safely tap 4, play the Flux that we just got to get rid of a potential blocker, and then, like every other enchantment that we have, the Flux will now animate. This will add extra damage from Shared Animosity, and also add extra damage from just being another card. So now when everything swings out, they are swinging as 10/4, double strike, trample, indestructible elementals. So that is a lot of damage. That is 20 damage per card. This is 100 damage on the board right now. This is kind of insane, the amount of power the deck can put out. And this is with missing constant land drops and barely getting any ramp. And we're not even counting the draws that Bello could have gotten. I did this entire thing completely incorrectly. I forgot the draw power that was happening. Let's assume that I wasn't drawing cards ever, and this is my first time I get to draw because of some magical situation that didn't work out for me. Now I draw 5 cards, and I'm in a much more stable spot, being able to drop a Myriad Landscape on the board and just run off to the races with that. Honestly, I misplayed the commander, and I still established a really powerful board state. That's kind of nutty. There's very few decks that can ignore literally 10 draw triggers and still end up with over 100 damage over like a handful of turns. It's kind of nuts. This guy is really, really busted. As for the upgrades I would choose for this deck, In the Web of War is kind of a neat one for very aggro strategies, giving all of your new played enchantments 2-0, and haste that they already have, but 2-0 ain't bad. But if you want even bigger damage, Gratuitous Violence lets you do double damage onto anything. Sanctum Weaver gives you access to a lot more mana, Gimli's Reckless Might gives you access to a fight spell on all of your swings, City on Fire gives you even more damage with triple damage. Echoing Assault will give all of our tokens Menace, and of course the ability to copy our tokens, which we can double up copies with cards like Molten Echoes. We just choose Elemental, and now whenever one of our Elemental enchantments swing, we will get an extra one of those enchantments. Unnatural Growth can double the power and toughness of every creature we control each turn, and Nature's Will says anytime one of these elementals deals combat damage to a player, we can reset our mana and cast even more of our really big enchantments. All in all, Bello's a pretty simple deck, and even when I misplayed him, he still does a lot of work. I highly recommend him. Holy fucking shit. And this is such a cheap version of the deck too. Like, you could get a precon for double the price of what I've built him for. Honestly, I think you'll have a blast playing him. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and what upgrades you would make, and also how much you screamed at me for forgetting to draw during the gameplay section. I think I need to lay down and go to bed. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, everyone, insert into video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.